our indictments speak powerfully in court. If you don't believe us, just look at the response that the Eastern District of Virginia under Lindsay Halligan did to James Comey, and look at the notes and publication of evidence. That's the type of material we have, but we have to safeguard our prosecutions because the ultimate accountability is with the verdict in a jury room.
For once, we agree with Kash Patel. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock now in New York, meaning a strict new deadline just passed moments ago for the Trump Justice Department, whose indictments, as you just heard, in their view, speak powerfully in court until they don't. Because this afternoon, in a rare and remarkable ruling, a federal judge in Virginia ordered the government, the Trump Justice Department, to hand over the grand jury materials, including audio, in the criminal case against former director of the FBI, Jim Comey. Now, why did the judge do that? Well, he explains, because there are evidently, quote, genuine issues of misconduct, end quote.
All right, so let me ask you something. What's the one thing that could actually stop Trump? Like, really stop him? Not slow him down, not inconvenience him, but actually hold him accountable in a way that changes everything? The answer is criminal prosecution. Real criminal charges, not civil lawsuits where you pay fines, not political investigations where you just refuse to cooperate, but actual criminal prosecution where you could go to prison, where you could be convicted of felonies, where you face real consequences. And for months, Trump's lawyers have been arguing he's immune from that as president, as a former president, as someone running for office, he can't be criminally prosecuted. But a federal judge just destroyed that argument, completely demolished it. The judge reaffirmed that Trump is not shielded from criminal prosecution for actions taken outside his official duties. And that means the path to prosecution is now guaranteed. This is Trump's worst nightmare. And it's actually happening. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
That is where we begin the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former Assistant Special Agent in charge at the FBI and National Security and Intelligence Analyst, Michael Feinberg, is back with us. He's also a fellow at Lawfare. Also joining us, former top official at the Department of Justice and legal analyst, Andrew Weissman's here. Let me start with the judge's extraordinary wording. And this is something I delved into, I believe, with both of you last week, on the questions around what was presented to the grand jury in the Comey case to reach an indictment after Eric Siebert, who was MAGA adjacent, MAGA in good standing with Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, but resigned over this case, saying there wasn't enough evidence to take it to a grand jury and reach an indictment. Lindsay Halligan comes in. We played Kash Patel, toasting her, feeding her, and pointing to the results. The result of Lindsay Halligan so far.
We're not talking about theoretical future prosecutions that might happen someday. We're talking about multiple criminal cases that are already in progress, cases that now have a clear legal path forward, because both the Supreme Court and federal appellate courts have confirmed that even presidents face criminal accountability. They've said presidents are not immune from federal criminal prosecution, that the Constitution and statutes don't support immunity for personal actions, that due process applies to everyone, including presidents. And with those rulings in place, judges are no longer blocked from advancing charges. Prosecution isn't just possible anymore, it's inevitable. Unless Trump somehow gets these rulings overturned on appeal, which is highly unlikely, he's going to face criminal trials, he's going to be prosecuted, and he could be convicted and sentenced. Let me give you the specifics, because they're stunning. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit ruled that former presidents are not immune from federal criminal prosecution. They said it doesn't matter if the alleged acts were performed while in office. The immunity claim doesn't hold up. The Constitution and federal statutes do not support immunity for Trump's actions. That was a unanimous decision from a federal appellate court. Then the Supreme Court weighed in. They said a former president lacks absolute immunity from federal criminal prosecution for conduct involving his official acts. Now, they did create some distinctions between official and unofficial acts, but they made clear that Trump is not completely immune, that personal conduct can be prosecuted, that unofficial acts are fair game, and that opened the door for these cases to proceed. And then Judge Juan Merchan in New York set a sentencing date for Trump's hush money conviction. He rejected all of Trump's immunity claims. He said criminal charges can be enforced, even against a sitting president. even against someone who was reelected. Trump's lawyers argued he can't be sentenced while serving as president. Judge Merchan said yes, he can. They argued the conviction should be overturned on immunity grounds. Judge Merchan said no, it shouldn't. They tried every legal argument they could think of to block sentencing, and the judge rejected all of them. So Trump is going to be sentenced. He's a convicted felon who's going to face a judge and hear his sentence, and that's unprecedented. That's never happened before in American history, a sitting president being sentenced for criminal conduct. But wait, it gets even worse for Trump. Special counsel Jack Smith filed his final report before leaving office, and in that report, he made something very clear. He said there is overwhelming admissible evidence to convict Trump for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. He said the only reason the prosecution was dropped is because Trump returned to office. Department of Justice policy says you can't prosecute a sitting president, so Smith had to drop the case. But he made it crystal clear in his report that the evidence is there, the case is ready, and it can be resumed once Trump's term concludes. So even though Trump got a temporary reprieve by winning re-election, that protection is temporary. Once he's out of office, those charges can come back. The prosecution can resume. And Jack Smith just laid out the roadmap for it. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, finally, Trump is going to face real consequences. Finally, the justice system is going to hold him accountable. You've watched him dodge accountability for years. You've seen him use every legal trick, every delay tactic, every immunity claim. And it's been frustrating. You've been wondering if anyone can actually prosecute him successfully, if he'll ever actually face a jury and potentially go to prison. And now federal judges are saying yes. The path is clear. Prosecution is guaranteed. He can't hide behind immunity anymore. And that feels like justice might actually happen. But Trump supporters are losing their minds right now. They see this as the ultimate proof of weaponization of the justice system. They think this is political persecution at the highest level. They believe these prosecutions are designed to take Trump down, not to enforce the law. And they're terrified about the precedent this sets. If Trump can be prosecuted, if federal judges are guaranteeing a path to criminal charges against the president, then every future president is at risk. Every political opponent can try to jail their enemies using the courts. And that's a dangerous path that could destroy American democracy. But here's what's actually happening. Federal judges are applying the law. They're looking at the Constitution, they're reviewing precedent, and they're reaching the conclusion that presidents are not above the law, that criminal accountability applies to everyone, that you can't commit crimes and hide behind the office of the presidency. These aren't activist judges making up new rules. These are judges enforcing long-standing principles, principles that say in America, no one is above the law, not even the president. So stick with me, because we need to break down exactly what charges Trump faces, what evidence exists against him, and what happens next in these prosecutions. This is the moment Trump has been dreading, and it's finally here. Okay, let's get into the details of what these court rulings actually say and what criminal cases Trump is facing, because understanding the specifics is crucial to grasping just how serious Trump's legal jeopardy actually is. Let's start with the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, because that was the most definitive statement on presidential immunity. This was a 3-judge panel reviewing Trump's claim that as a former president, he has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for anything he did while in office. Trump's lawyers made a sweeping argument. They said the presidency requires immunity or presidents couldn't do their jobs. They said the threat of prosecution would make presidents too cautious. They said only Congress through impeachment and removal can hold presidents accountable for official misconduct. And they said allowing criminal prosecution of former presidents would turn the justice system into a political weapon. The D.C. Circuit rejected every single one of these arguments. Unanimously, all 3 judges agreed. They said former presidents are not immune from federal criminal prosecution. Period. They walked through the Constitution, through historical precedent, through Supreme Court case law, and they concluded there's no support for the kind of blanket immunity Trump was claiming. The court's reasoning was methodical and devastating to Trump's position. They said the Constitution doesn't mention presidential immunity. The framers knew how to grant immunity when they wanted to. They gave members of Congress immunity for speeches and debates, but they didn't give presidents immunity from prosecution. That's significant. It suggests the framers intentionally chose not to protect presidents in that way. The court also pointed to the impeachment clause. The Constitution says that officials who are impeached and convicted can still face criminal prosecution afterward. That implies presidents can be criminally prosecuted. If they had absolute immunity, that language wouldn't make sense. And the court looked at Supreme Court precedent, cases like Nixon v. Fitzgerald, which gave presidents limited immunity in civil cases. But the Supreme Court specifically said that decision didn't apply to criminal prosecutions. Civil immunity is one thing, Criminal immunity is something else entirely, and there's no basis for it. The D.C. Circuit also addressed Trump's argument that only impeachment can hold presidents accountable. They said no, impeachment is a political process. It doesn't replace criminal prosecution. They're separate tracks. Congress can impeach for political misconduct. Courts can prosecute for crimes. And nothing in the Constitution says you have to impeach before you prosecute. In fact, the Constitution contemplates both. It says officials can be impeached and later prosecuted, not impeached or prosecuted, both. So Trump's argument that impeachment is the exclusive remedy, the court said that's just wrong. There's no textual support for it. There's no historical support for it. It's an argument Trump's lawyers made up because they needed some way to block prosecution. Now let's talk about the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity, because that's even more important, given it's the final word. The Supreme Court said a former president lacks absolute immunity from federal criminal prosecution for conduct involving his official acts. But notice the language. They said lacks absolute immunity. They created a framework where some official acts might have presumptive immunity, where core constitutional powers have absolute immunity. But they made clear there's no blanket protection. And for unofficial acts for personal conduct, there's no immunity at all. So Trump's personal efforts to overturn the election, not immune. The hush money payments, not immune. Obstruction of justice to protect himself, not immune. These are personal actions, even if they happened while he was president, and the Supreme Court said those can be prosecuted. What makes these rulings so devastating for Trump is they close off his primary avenue for avoiding prosecution. For months, his legal strategy has been to claim immunity and delay everything, push trials past elections, hope that winning office again would make prosecutions go away. But federal judges have now said no, immunity doesn't apply. The cases proceed. You can't delay forever. And that means Trump's going to face trials. He's going to have to defend himself on the merits, the evidence, the witnesses, the documents. That's what's going to matter, not procedural immunity, arguments. So what cases is Trump actually facing? Let's break them down. First, the New York hush money case. Trump was already convicted in this case. A jury found him guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records to hide hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. He was supposed to be sentenced, but his lawyers kept delaying. They argued he shouldn't be sentenced until after the election. Then after he won, they argued he can't be sentenced while serving as president. But Judge Merchan rejected all of that. He set a sentencing date, and he made clear that Trump's conviction stands. So Trump is going to be sentenced. The question is what the sentence will be. Fines, probation, house arrest, actual jail time? We don't know yet, but the fact that he's being sentenced at all is unprecedented. A sitting president who's a convicted felon facing sentencing. Second, the federal election obstruction case. This is Jack Smith's case about Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The fake elector scheme, the pressure on state officials, the incitement of the January 6th mob. Smith had to drop the case because of DOJ policy against prosecuting sitting presidents. But in his final report, Smith made clear the evidence is overwhelming. He detailed it all. The pressure Trump put on election officials, the lies he told about fraud, the scheme to create fake electoral certificates, the delay in calling off the mob on January 6th. Smith said with overwhelming admissible evidence, Trump could be convicted. The only reason he's not being prosecuted is because he's president. But once his term ends, this case can be revived. The evidence still exists. The witnesses are still available, and the statute of limitations won't expire. So Trump is looking at potential federal charges the moment he leaves office. Third, the Georgia election interference case. This is the state case about Trump's efforts to overturn Georgia's election results. The infamous phone call where he asked the Secretary of State to find him votes. The fake elector scheme in Georgia. Pressure on state officials. This case is still active. It's been delayed and complicated by various legal challenges, but it hasn't been dropped. And because it's a state case, Trump can't pardon himself if convicted. He doesn't have power over state prosecutions the way he might over federal ones. So this remains a serious threat even while he's president. Fourth, the classified documents case. Trump took highly sensitive national security documents when he left office. He stored them improperly at Mar-a-Lago. And when the government asked for them back, he allegedly hid them, lied about them, and obstructed the investigation. This case has been tangled up in legal fights over whether Trump can be prosecuted while serving as president. But the core charges remain, and the evidence is strong. There are photos of boxes of classified documents in bathrooms and storage rooms. There are recordings of Trump showing classified information to people without security clearances. There are witness statements from his own lawyers and staff saying he directed them to hide documents. Once Trump leaves office, this case could proceed. and obstruction charges are very difficult to defend against when the evidence is this clear. Each of these cases has its own timeline and complications, but what they all have in common is that Trump can no longer hide behind immunity claims. Federal judges have made that clear. The Supreme Court has made that clear. So these cases are going to proceed. Trump is going to face trials or sentencing, and he's going to have to defend himself on the evidence. Can he beat these charges? Maybe. He's got expensive lawyers. He's got friendly media that will spin everything in his favor. He's got millions of supporters who will believe whatever he says. But he's also got some very serious evidence problems. In the hush money case, he was already convicted. That's done. The evidence convinced the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. In the federal election case, Jack Smith documented overwhelming evidence. In Georgia, there's literally a recorded phone call of Trump pressuring officials. In the classified documents case, there are photos and recordings. These aren't weak cases built on circumstantial evidence. These are strong cases with direct evidence of misconduct. What's particularly damning is that these cases come from different sources: federal prosecutors, state prosecutors, grand juries in different jurisdictions. All of them independently looked at evidence and concluded there was probable cause to charge Trump with crimes. That's not a coincidence. That's not a political conspiracy. That's what happens when someone commits crimes in multiple places and multiple prosecutors investigate. You get multiple charges, and Trump can't credibly claim that every prosecutor, every grand jury, every judge is biased against him. At some point, the simpler explanation is that he committed crimes, and there's evidence of it. The timeline question is crucial. When will these cases actually go to trial? The hush money sentencing happens soon. Judge Merchan set the date, and Trump's appeals to delay it have failed. So that's happening in the immediate future. The other cases are more complicated. While Trump's president, DOJ policy says he can't be prosecuted federally. So the election obstruction case and the classified documents case probably wait until he's out of office. The Georgia case could theoretically proceed, but practically it's probably going to be delayed until Trump's term ends. So we're looking at a situation where Trump faces sentencing soon for the hush money conviction, and then after his term ends in 2029, he faces potential prosecution in multiple other cases. Unless he dies or becomes incapacitated, unless statutes of limitations run out, unless something unexpected happens, those prosecutions are coming. The judges have guaranteed the legal path exists. All right, let's break this down into the key points you absolutely need to understand about Trump's criminal jeopardy and what these court rulings mean. Point number 1, the immunity defense is dead. Multiple courts, including a unanimous D.C. Circuit panel and the Supreme Court, have ruled that Trump doesn't have blanket immunity from criminal prosecution. Former presidents can be prosecuted for unofficial acts and personal conduct. The distinction between official and unofficial acts matters, but courts have made clear that many of Trump's alleged crimes fall into the personal category, so the legal shield Trump hoped would protect him doesn't exist. The immunity argument that was supposed to block all these cases has failed, and that means prosecution can proceed. Point number 2, Trump faces multiple serious criminal cases with strong evidence. The hush money case, where he's already been convicted by a jury, the federal election obstruction case, where Jack Smith says there's overwhelming evidence, the Georgia election interference case with a recorded phone call, the classified documents case with photos and witness testimony. Each of these cases has different legal issues and different timelines, but they all share one thing in common: there's substantial evidence against Trump. This isn't just accusations. These are cases built on documents, recordings, witness testimony, and in one case, an actual jury conviction. Defending against this volume of evidence across multiple cases is extremely difficult. Point number 3, the sentencing in the hush money case is unprecedented. Judge Merchan rejected every argument Trump's lawyers made for delay. He said Trump will be sentenced, and that means we're about to see something that's never happened in American history: a sitting president being sentenced for criminal conduct. Now, what the sentence will be is still unknown. Could be fines and probation, could be house arrest, could theoretically be jail time, though that seems unlikely for a sitting president. But regardless of the specific sentence, the fact that it's happening at all is a watershed moment. It establishes that presidents can be held criminally accountable, that convictions can be enforced, even against the most powerful person in the country. Point number 4, the post-presidency prosecutions are almost certain. Jack Smith made crystal clear in his final report that the federal election case has overwhelming evidence and can be resumed after Trump's term. The Georgia case remains active. The classified documents case is ready to proceed. So even though Trump got a temporary reprieve by winning re-election, that protection is time limited. In 2029, when his term ends, he faces potential prosecution in multiple jurisdictions, and he'll be 82 years old. He'll have no immunity, no presidential protection, and prosecutors will be ready with cases they've already built. That's Trump's nightmare scenario, and federal judges have guaranteed the legal path for it to happen. Point number 5. The precedent this sets for presidential accountability. These rulings aren't just about Trump. They establish principles that will govern how we hold all future presidents accountable. The courts have said presidents can be criminally prosecuted after leaving office. That immunity is limited, not absolute. That personal criminal conduct is not protected just because you were president at the time. This is a fundamental statement about rule of law in America, and it will affect every future president. They'll know that if they commit crimes, they can be prosecuted once they leave office. That's a powerful deterrent, and it's a crucial principle for maintaining democracy. So where does all this go? What actually happens? In the short term, Trump gets sentenced in the hush money case. We'll see whether Judge Merchan imposes serious penalties or goes relatively light given Trump's status. That sentence, whatever it is, will be a huge story. It will be analyzed endlessly. Trump will attack it. His supporters will claim persecution. His critics will say it's accountability. And it will set the tone for how we think about holding presidents criminally responsible. In the medium term, Trump serves out his second term with these cases hanging over him. The knowledge that prosecution awaits him when he leaves office. That's going to affect his behavior, his decision-making, his legacy. He can't escape these cases. He can only delay them. And delay isn't the same as victory. In the long term, after Trump leaves office, the prosecutions resume. Federal prosecutors can bring charges for election obstruction. Georgia prosecutors can proceed with their case. The classified documents case moves forward. And Trump, as a private citizen in his 80s, has to stand trial, has to defend himself, has to face the possibility of conviction and prison time. Now, will he actually go to prison? That's the million-dollar question. Even if convicted, judges might be reluctant to imprison an elderly former president. They might impose house arrest or suspended sentences. But the possibility is real, and that's unprecedented in American history. My prediction? Trump gets a relatively light sentence in the hush money case. Maybe probation, maybe house arrest, maybe a fine. Judge Merchan will want to hold Trump accountable, but won't want to create a massive crisis by jailing a sitting president. After Trump's term ends, at least one of the other cases proceeds to trial. Probably the federal election obstruction case, since Jack Smith already built it and documented the evidence. Trump faces trial, and there's a real possibility of conviction, given the strength of the evidence. But even if convicted, Trump probably avoids prison due to his age and the unprecedented nature of imprisoning a former president. He gets some combination of house arrest, fines, and probation, and he spends his final years fighting these cases, appealing, claiming persecution. His legacy is forever defined by these criminal prosecutions. But here's what really matters. The principle that's being established. Federal judges have made clear that presidents can be prosecuted, that they're not above the law, that criminal accountability applies even to the most powerful office. That's crucial for American democracy, because if presidents could commit crimes with immunity, if they were truly above the law, we wouldn't have a republic anymore. We'd have an elected monarchy. And these court rulings prevent that. They preserve the principle that in America, everyone is equal before the law, even presidents, especially presidents. The Trump supporters who see this as persecution need to ask themselves a question. Do you want a system where presidents can commit crimes with no consequences, where they're above the law, where they can use their power to do anything they want and face no accountability? Because that's not the system the founders created. That's not American democracy. That's authoritarianism. And if you support that when it's your guy in power, you better be prepared to accept it when it's someone you hate. Because once you establish that presidents are above the law, that applies to all future presidents, Democratic ones, Republican ones, all of them. Is that really what you want? And the Trump critics who are celebrating these rulings need to remember something too. Prosecution isn't the same as conviction. Trump still gets due process. He still gets to defend himself. Juries still have to find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And there's always the possibility he beats these charges, that juries acquit him, that appeals courts overturn convictions. The path to prosecution is guaranteed, but the outcome isn't. Justice is a process, not a foregone conclusion, so temper your expectations. Recognize that even with strong evidence, trials are uncertain, and be prepared for the possibility that Trump escapes conviction through legal technicalities or sympathetic juries. What's certain is this: Trump's worst nightmare is happening. Federal judges have guaranteed a path to criminal prosecution. The immunity shield is gone. The cases are proceeding, and Trump is going to face criminal accountability, whether he likes it or not. This is unprecedented. This is historic. And this is what happens when you commit crimes and then become president. You can delay justice. You can fight it. But ultimately, you have to answer for your actions, and that time is coming for Trump. The federal judges have made sure of it. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. The prosecutions are just beginning, and American democracy's commitment to the principle that no one is above the law is being tested like never before.